my name is Emerson Little, and today I'm going to be talking about my senior project in another place. And before I begin, I'd like to say a big thank you to my project sponsor, Dr. Patty McCarthy, whose guidance and advice helped me through this film project. So In Another Place is an experimental science fiction short film that was created to draw attention to the issues of climate change and environmental degradation. My Whittier Scholars digital media production major focuses on the intersection of photography, film production, and graphic design. I've incorporated all these elements into my capstone project, which consists of a 22-page screenplay with an annotated bibliography, a short experimental science fiction film, a press kit containing production concept art, and a poster, all of which are used to tell and market a cautionary tale presenting a tale of two potential futures, one in which the environment is protected and one in which it is degraded. So I chose to write a screenplay with an ecological theme because I wanted to draw attention to what is probably the defining issue of our time, climate change. The story of my film would fall into the film genre of climate change fiction, more commonly known as Cli-Fi. Coined by a Taiwan-based journalist named Dan Bloom, Cli-Fi serves as a vehicle for delivering a powerful and emotional story, and it pushes the reader, or viewer in this case, to wake up to the existential threat that human-made global warming poses to future generations. Climate change first became prevalent in the films of the 1970s, after the publication of Silent Spring, The Population Bomb, and The Limits to Growth. These books, combined with the general excitement generated by the first Earth Day in 1970, influenced filmmakers to experiment with fictional films about environmental issues. Silent Running is a prime example of the ecological science fiction of the late 1960s and 1970s. In Silent Running, we see the last of Earth's forests are in spaceship biodomes orbiting Saturn, and a botanist played by Bruce Stern decides that's where they should stay. The film's ecological message is clear, which is true to the science fiction classic, Soylent Green from 1973, a dystopian film which portrays a polluted and overpopulated world. And one of the most powerful scenes from this film that inspired my own is when Edward G. Robinson's character enters a room where he's surrounded by digital images of nature as he's about to die. I emulated this idea of being distant from nature, yet finding comfort in images of nature at the same time in my own film. Since then, there have been many other films addressing the themes of climate change and the human relationship to nature and the planet. And these types of films have served as sources of inspiration for my project. Now, how do you make a film during a worldwide pandemic? Well, one of the most important qualities a filmmaker needs is the ability to adapt. Different filmmakers have adapted in different ways. In the fall, Hollywood unions and producers struck a deal and created a completely new approach to film production. They developed a zone system based on results from statistical modeling by Columbia University that drastically reshapes the production day. They have new compliance supervisors and officers enforcing these zones, as well as daily testing and 10-hour maximum shooting days. Union sets, this is a new standard, and for indie productions, this is a blueprint to follow. Some productions have created bubble environments for the entirety of their shoots. Other productions have turned to using set medics and sanitation workers. Sanitation department before the pandemic might have meant whoever had to take out the trash, and now it means entirely disinfecting the shoots between, before, and after scenes, and providing that ever-constant supply of hand sanitizer. Film production teams have also been turning to video game technology and using virtual environments from the Unreal Engine marketplace. These set backgrounds are projected onto high-resolution video backdrops, which can kind of fool the camera into seeing a realistic background. Even in pre-pandemic times, things are constantly moving when you're on a film set. It's what people in the entertainment industry like to call controlled chaos. Yeah, you can move my agenda. Controlled chaos. And there was definitely a bit of controlled chaos as I started planning this project a year ago. So originally, I had plans to go out and film at locations around Southern California. However, because of time constraints and the shutdown, I ended up shifting my strategy early on. I briefly turned to my backup plan, which is to create an animated short film, but eventually decided to take a more experimental approach. Borrowed from Chris Marker's 1962 experimental science fiction film La Jetée, using mostly still images to create a moving yet unmoving motion picture. La Jetée is a film that deals with the notions of memory and time. It consists almost entirely of still images. The film appeals to the same nostalgic impulse that draws people to their old family photograph albums. It depicts time as an eternal series of events with no past, no future, no present, or at least almost no present, apart from one shocking moment when the woman moves, hinting at this possible existence of a higher dimension of reality. My intent was to use photography as a means of storytelling, which I learned about in Danny's digital photography classes and Professor Albert's history of photography class. So my film story began with an idea influenced and inspired by a wide range of sources, from Soylent Green and Silent Running, more modern works such as the Blade Runner films, where climate change and environmental degradation are taking place in the background of the main story, and Annihilation, which uses cancer as a metaphor for climate change. I was also inspired by TV shows such as Fringe, Counterpart, and 12 Monkeys, which played with the notion of parallel worlds and universes within their story worlds. I incorporated the idea of parallel worlds and the idea of individuals, both alive and dead, into my screenplay. In my story, Ridley, a horticulturist living in an environmentally devastated future, is regularly transported to a parallel world where her dead parents are still alive and human and nature live in harmony. She must find a way to fix her planet before she's trapped in the alternate world for good. Whoa. Okay. So not all worlds are the same, as I wrote in the opening line of my screenplay. The story begins with Ridley making her way through a nanobot blizzard, walking through the snow in a forest. All of a sudden, she hears an uncanny noise and everything turns black as she crosses over to a world where she finds that her dead parents are still alive. So when I interviewed production designer Alex McDowell, who has worked on such films as Minority Report, Fight Club, and Man of Steel, he claimed that there is no science fiction, only future reality. Anything we imagine, we can now create. Alex said that when you're immersed in science fiction, you realize the power of the imagination and that the opportunities that can be imagined are limitless. When I first started writing, I knew that one of the major rules for my fictional universe was that every time Ridley crosses over, she'll stay longer and longer in the other world, shortening her time in her own world. In the end, she'll be stuck over there. And the idea of world building helped guide me in writing my story. And it really stems out of Professor Long's transmedia storytelling class. I ended up writing most of the script as a voiceover, which works in the case of this story because it starts at the end and ends at the beginning, and it's told from Ridley's point of view. I had an audio audition process where I listened to different actors who sent in audio. After hearing so many different interpretations of my script, I decided to go back and add in other voices so the story wouldn't be so static. In the end, I ended up casting 2 voice actors, Jillian Weber and Gia Hone, based on their strong audio auditions. I mailed Tascam audio devices to my voice actors, allowing them to record their lines in their own time. I met with them over Zoom during winter break, and we coordinated some of the conversations between the characters in the script. Once the voice actors had recorded once they'd recorded their audio, I mailed back the equipment and I transferred the files onto my computer so I could start sound editing, which involved layering the different volumes, reducing background noise, and inserting additional sounds. So while I was waiting for the voice actors to record their lines, I was looking for visuals to accompany the narration. Film, after all, is a visual medium, and I needed to plan what my film would look like. Some of my pre-visualization work stemmed out of a digital illustration class I took with Professor Brody Albert back in the fall. I created concept art for my original idea of an animated film and used that concept art as a jumping off point to help me in my storyboarding in my final version of the script. Then I went back to some of my old SD cards and compiled photos I took over the years that would apply to my film. I edited them in Lightroom, applying photo retouching and editing techniques I learned from Danny's digital photography class. I then imported them into Photoshop, where I applied what I learned in my moving image classes to create a sense of movement within the still images by adding video and adjustment layers to simulate the snowstorm. I then moved these images into After Effects, where I played around with the camera tool and positioning to create a variation of the Ken Burns effect before moving them into Adobe Premiere, where I was able to edit and apply transitions with sound effects. However, some photos and footage I took exclusively for this project. For example, on New Year's Day, I went on a hike to a nearly abandoned dam and photographed this long rectangular structure built on the side of the dam, and it closely resembled these World Seed Bank images that I'd used put together during pre-visualization. So you can see how my script translated the screen with the side-by-side comparison I've created of the opening sequence of my film.
Not all worlds are the same. I should know because I live in both. I see them every time I open my eyes. The first time it happened, my corner of the world had been hit hard by the nanobot blizzard. I was walking through the snow, my heavy shoes leaving deep footprints in the embankment, when I heard it. A low, mechanical clicking sound that seemed to be coming from the tree borks, partially organic, partially mechanical trees used to generate oxygen. The combination of snow and wind made it hard for me to keep my eyes open while I struggled to walk. My heartbeat became rapid and my cold, gloved hands began to shake uncontrollably as I tried to block out the sound. Suddenly, it hit me from behind, an abrupt force that was more than just the wind. That was the last thing I remembered before I blacked out. When I opened my eyes, I was in a completely different place, a peaceful place, another world. I had awakened in a bedroom, only it wasn't any bedroom I'd known before. It kind of looked like my parents' old bedroom. Natural light shone through the slats of a window behind me, illuminating a lively, colorful room with hanging plants. I looked out the windows to see orange-colored leaves against blue sky. The first time I'd ever encountered a sky so blue. The bedroom door opened. Glancing up, I found my mom and dad standing in the doorway. My mom burst into tears the instant she saw me, and my dad just stood there, shocked, staring back with a confused expression on his face. I was at a loss for words, wondering how they could possibly be alive. I looked into my mom's eyes as she wiped away tears. I'd been dead in their world for 3 years, and they had died in mine 3 years ago from this very date. I rushed forward to hug them both when it hit. The same mechanical noise from before began to reverberate in my ears as I reached out to my parents. I was about to touch my mom's hand when I blacked out again. When I opened my eyes, I was back where I'd started, back in the snow. I looked around quickly, but saw nothing and heard nothing moving through the snow. I was alone again, making my way home and crying silently to myself.
Okay. So in the first phase of editing, which took several months, I focused primarily on piecing the voiceover audio together, while also editing my still images in order to accompany the story, so that this audio and image came together to tell a cohesive narrative. My voice actors gave me multiple audio file options to choose from, which was extremely helpful in the editing process because I had choices. I also had a wide variety of photographs to choose from that I'd saved, and being able to have options in the editing room is definitely important. So in the second phase of editing, I focused on sound design, music, and credits. When I was adding additional noises, I had to think about questions like, how does this sound aid in telling my story without detracting from it? How is this sound used to underscore what we're hearing from our voiceover narrator? I needed ordinary sound effects and was able to find a lot of these from around my house. For example, I was able to use my Tascam audio recorder to record the sound of my mom making an omelet. So once editing was complete, I moved into the graphic design aspect of my project, creating my poster and press kit using skills I learned in InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop. My film design process began with the poster. An idea, it came to me like late one night. I scribbled it onto a crummy sheet of paper, hoping to come back to it later. And plans shift because I was limited in the number of photographs that I had to choose from. But luckily, my voice actors were gracious enough to take their own photos and send them over. And I came up with a different idea of having an extreme close-up of Ridley's eyeball looking up at the black bar, dividing her eye from this monochrome image I took for the polluted planet world. For the press kit, I went off a different idea I had for the poster, which involved an extreme close-up of my protagonist's eyeball. Once again, we get that eyeball imagery, and it represents, but here it represents both her awe at seeing her dead parents again, and her terror at finding out that she's dead in their world. So this horizontal press kit poster ended with being more of a photo collage, and as a stand-in for the other world, you might be able to see here. That's a photograph of a cabinet doorknob, and I combined it with a blown-up image of my voice actor Jillian's eyeball, playing around with blending modes and layers in Photoshop. So once these images were combined, I placed my typographic treatment of my film's title in another place in the dead center of the eyeball. So the press kit opens with this image and gradually moves into production artwork. And I finished off my press kit with individual bios of each of the film's voice actors and a synopsis with photo stills from the film accompanying the text. And then I ended with credits because I wanted to make sure I acknowledged everyone who helped me. Because film, after all, is a collaborative medium, and even during a pandemic. So now I'd like to screen a trailer for my 24-minute short film in another place. But before I do, I want to make sure the sharing options, I want to make sure we can hear the audio. So let's do this again.
Not all worlds are the same. I should know because I live in both. I see them every time I open my eyes. Our world was devastated by a disease that had destroyed our entire agricultural system. There was another Earth. I'd been dead in their world for 3 years. My death had been an accident. The other Earth was an ecological paradise teeming with life. My world had almost no natural vegetation, a place where the skies were gray and the lands had dried. The ice caps had melted and the ocean had risen, the crops had died and food was scarce. What if there was a way to somehow transport goods from one world to the next? Maybe there was still time to make a change.
What are the key takeaways from this presentation? Well, we learned that even during a worldwide pandemic, you can still make media, even if you're adaptive and open to creative solutions. The medium of film can be used to draw attention to important issues in an entertaining manner. Photography can be used as an effective storytelling device. Photography can be combined with film techniques to create experimental media. And graphic design can be used to not only enhance your story, but also to market your creation. Thank you. And before I end, I'd like to acknowledge all the people who've helped me out along the way. So thank you again, Professor McCarthy, for sponsoring my project and offering your advice, knowledge of film history, as well as production techniques. That was extremely helpful as I was making this project. And thank you for all the opportunities you've given me throughout my college career. I'd like to thank my voice actors, Jillian Weber and Gia Hone, who worked under extraordinary circumstances and helped me get this project made. I'd also like to say a big thank you to my family who stepped in and helped me out and offered support throughout this project and throughout my college career. Next, I'd like to acknowledge all the digital art professors I've had classes with, including Danny, who's been an excellent advisor over the years and helped me in creating this major and getting it approved through the Wiga Scholars Program. Jenny, whose classes on typography and graphic design helped me become more comfortable using programs such as InDesign and Illustrator. Brody, who taught me to be more articulate in promoting and marketing my art, as well as helping me hone my skills in Photoshop to create some really cool art. And thank you to Professor Albers for teaching me the history of photography and providing me with the necessary background in the arts to help me continue my creative career. And thank you to Professor Long, whose guidance in media theory and knowledge of world building has really helped and encouraged me. I'd also like to take a moment to thank my peers at the Quaker Campus newspaper and VPS for their support. And I'd like to thank Edna, Michael, and everyone at the Office of Marketing and Communications who taught me how to use various media production tools and helped me become a visual storyteller in the process. Lastly, I'd like to say a big thank you to Professor Wren, Professor Sanders, Joanna Diaz, and the entire Whittier Scholars Program. And thank you to everyone who stayed for this presentation. Sorry if there were technical difficulties. And my work's cited. Any questions?